Let's talk about the different types of ostomies because I think people don't understand this very well. So say you have perforated diverticulitis and you get what's called a Hartmann's procedure. So what are the components of a Hartmann's procedure?
You remove the sigmoid.
Sigmoidectomy.
Then you do a colostomy.
Yeah, and this is what we would call a end colostomy, okay? So in perforated diverticulitis, here's your colon, here's your appendix, here's your rectum, okay? This is your sigmoid colon. So you do a sigmoidectomy, okay? Then you have a rectal pouch because you stapled off here. This is all gone, okay? Then the type of ostomy that we get, we pull this up to the skin, and so this is what we would call an end colostomy. Where on the abdominal wall is this typically seen?
The left lower quadrant.
Yeah, so this is typically in the left lower quadrant, and it's an end, meaning it's one tube coming up to the skin, okay? And so some stool will come out of here because you still have colon, right? Then eventually we can reverse them, hopefully. They would need to wait minimum 6 weeks. What do they need before you reverse somebody?
Like other than bowel function?
This is down the line now. I'm gonna talk about reversing this patient that had perforated diverticulitis. What do I have to do before but anytime I touch the colon electively, what do I want to do?
You want to prep you.
Okay, so they'll get prepped, yes. That's like peri-op.
Okay.
What else? What if there was like a big mass over here?
Well, I don't know what it's called when they go through the ostomy, but like a colonoscopy.
Yeah, so they need a colonoscopy. So before we reverse anybody, I need to make sure there's not some other crazy tumor or mass or something, because then all of a sudden I do that colon surgery and then they're like, oh, by the way, there's some mass in their right colon. Okay, so they definitely need a colonoscopy before we reverse them. But so, what?
Are they going through the rectal side also?
Yeah, so you look at everything. So you want to look here, make sure there's no, so you have to cannulate the bowel twice. You go through the anus into the rectum, look here, you'll get to the staple line, and then you go through the ostomy here and you look at the remainder of the colon. Then we can take them, you bowel prep them like you said, then we're going to put this back to here, boom, boom. So now they'll be reversed, okay? But that's an end colostomy, because I feel like these get mixed up. Now, say I had a patient who has a burn wound in their perineum or Fournier's gangrene, and I want to just divert them for wound care purposes. What kind of ostomy do we typically do then? I don't know if you guys have seen this. No, because that type we're going to talk about in a second, and it's actually the least favorable. And we'll get to why next.
Can you also do a colostomy?
Yeah.
Have it be a loop?
A loop.
Yeah.
So instead of being an end where that comes out, I can do a loop, which is easier. So typically the way I do it, I would do a diagnostic laparoscopy first, take a look, make sure I have enough colon to bring up to the abdominal wall. And then we develop what we call a double barrel loop. So literally you're taking a tube and then it's going to be like this to the skin. So if you wanted to, you could cannulate both parts of that. Does that make sense? So, and it's a little easier to reverse sometimes. So a loop is going to be this comes up like this here, and this part comes up here. So that's what it looks like. This is like a double barrel loop colostomy. And one can go this way, one can go this way, okay? Now, why you said ileostomy. So that's another type of ostomy that we see. So say a patient has, I don't know, what we were just talking about. Say a patient has familial FAP, familial edematous polyposis, or say ulcerative colitis. What am I going to do? Yeah, I'm going to take out the entire colon, okay? And so then what's coming to here, to the colon? The terminal ileum, the TI, terminal ileum. So the entire colon's gone. Now, all that's left is a, quote, end, not a loop, end ileostomy. Why is an ileostomy not so great, like you said before, if I was just using it like as a diversion technique? What are the disadvantages or the challenges we deal with an ileostomy?
Leaking?
No.
Large
Or
volume?
yeah, electrolyte abnormality.
Exactly. So fluid issues. Yes, exactly. So this can become high output, okay? And we can develop electrolyte abnormalities, we can develop malnutrition, different things like that. It's always better to not have an ileostomy if we have a choice. And then if you still have some rectum left over, you can, down the road, theoretically, reverse an ileostomy and do what's called a J pouch, where we literally take this and we loop it onto itself, and we make a pouch out of the terminal ileum, and then do a rectal anastomosis here. I had one of those recently that we had to operate on a few times that had a history of UC. A J or an S, there's another one called an S pouch, and that's just the same thing, but just with one more loop to make that pouch even larger.
Is an ileostomy preferred to a jejunostomy just because
Okay, let's talk about it. So what's the difference there? Ileostomy. So the ones we've talked about so far are colostomy. And again, there's loop versus end for all these things. And then we said ileostomy. Okay? Then you just said jejunostomy. What's the difference there?
I think the advantage of ileostomy would be you get to absorb more bile, right?
Yeah, so again, now we're talking more proximal, okay? Mm-hmm. So now you have a more proximal ostomy. Ostomy just means a hole. Yeah, an opening. So a jejunostomy, the issue there is going to be big time, like we said, bile output and high outputs. So that too is essentially what pathologically would be like an enterocutaneous fistula, which is going to get us into our next talk. So a high output enterocutaneous fistula is a problem. And then that again, my big thing is always on the enterico-hepatic circulation. Anything supraproximal where you're losing bile, you're not going to get biliary reabsorption of bile in the terminal ileum, and you're going to run into trouble, and you're going to eventually run into some hepatic failure if that circulation is disrupted.